So that was, I think, very, very interesting for all the people in general right now, worldwide. So we can step more into the bodybuilding topic, I would say. And the one thing I wanted to ask you is, I just checked some 90s footage and today's footage, from today's Mr. Olympias and stuff. And what I saw is that although the 90s guys were less big, so they had, in general, the top guys, they were not as big as guys right now in the 2010s, but there definitely are or were more conditioned. So do you think at a certain level of mass, can a bodybuilder be that conditioned? Can a bodybuilder having the mass of Big Ramy, for example, to name a guy, can he even with that mass, can he be as conditioned as Ronnie Coleman 98 or I don't know, Flex Wheeler 93 or Dorian Yates in his prime? Or do you think they're just too big?
Well, the whole thing with a lot of the pro bodybuilders, like the Big Ramy you mentioned, they want to get as big as possible because they think that's the ticket to win. The problem with that is, past a certain point, it's hard to make, to have maximal physique quality along with the mass. Something is sacrificed. So now, using Big Ramy as an example, I look at his physique. I think he has generally good shape. And one year I was very impressed because his thighs always overpowered his calves. And he doesn't have small calves, but his thighs were so gigantic, they made his calves look like sticks. So somebody must have talked to him because the next year he showed up, he had reduced the thigh size. So now his balance was much better between his thighs and his calves. So what I think is, I look at a guy like Big Ramy, or whatever it is, Big Ramy, and I look at him, I say, if this guy dropped, let's say 15, 20 pounds, with his muscle shape and his width and his size, he wouldn't lose that much size. He'd still be one of the biggest guys on stage, but his muscle quality, his definition, his waist would look small, and his taper would look better, would be so superior that he probably would be nearly unbeatable. Nobody would be able to beat him. But the problem is, it's in these guys' heads that they have to be as big as possible, and as long as they have, what they think is a certain amount of acceptable muscle definition, they just stay, they stay big. And another problem is the people around them are all yes men. The people that work at Big Ramy are saying, he says, well, how do I look? Am I ready? Oh, you look tremendous. They're not honest with that. If they were honest, they'd say, Ramy, you look great, but you should drop a couple of pounds to get a little harder appearance. Get your waist down a little smaller and get your legs a little more cut, this and that. If you do that, you'll look a lot. But nobody has the guts to say that to him. So he thinks he's in great shape. This is a problem with this guy. They have all yes men around. Oh, you look great. You look great. They never give any objective opinions. Nothing. That's another problem. That's why these guys never change.
Yeah, I will talk about that later. But what I also wanted to say with that question is, for example, the 98 Ronnie Coleman, when he won his first Olympia, he wasn't as big as in 03, his biggest Olympia, but he was way more conditioned. The muscle detail, it was just not comparable. What do you think was the difference there? Do you think Ronnie Coleman also sacrificed a little, conditioning for mass, or?
Well, Ronnie was always, interested in as much mass as possible. He trained very heavy, and that's why he has all these 20 surgeries he's had to have. I mean, he tore his body apart because, he trains. He's kind of in a situation where he just feels he needs to train heavy all year round, and you can't do that, especially as you get older. I mean, the guy was still training that way when he's past 40 years old, and he ripped his body apart. I mean, he had muscle tears. The last year he competed, he had a lat tear. I forget, he had something else wrong with him too, maybe a bicep. I don't remember, but he has this size fetish where he feels like the bigger the better. And again, the thinking is, as long as I have enough definition where I don't look out of shape, that I'll still win. In other words, you know what I mean? And he figures that, he figures nobody could come close to him in size. He has enough definition to win, so that's what he's going to do. He doesn't say, well, I would look a little bit better if I was 15 pounds light. I'd be cut. I wouldn't have the stomach sticking out. My
Yeah.
waist looks small. He doesn't look at it like that. He just figures I got to be so big that I wipe the other guys off the stage where it's no contest. And that's basically the way it was. See? But then he was criticized because his stomach was sticking out like a pregnant woman there. That's the price you pay when you try and get too big. All these guys, they take so many drugs that they get this big giant poochy stomach and doesn't look good. I mean, it just doesn't. But that they have size above everything. That's the way they look at it.
Yeah, I think also when you especially compare the weights of Ronnie Coleman 03 and 98, it's a huge difference. It was much wider when he was so big.
Yeah, that's the same thing happened to Dorian Yates in his last couple of shows. That's unavoidable. I mean, if you try and get bigger and bigger, your waist is going to increase. Again, if you could, if your torso, your shoulders, if you can get it beefy, big enough, you can get away with it, but it's still not the most aesthetic look. But that's again, the days of where a guy like Frank Zane. Did you ever hear of Frank Zane? He was a three-time Mr. Olympia in the late '70s. I mean, Frank Zane, I think he was a fantastic bodybuilder. And my God, he had a fantastic. I know Frank Ward very well. But the truth of the matter is, and I'm sure Frank would not get mad at me for saying this, Frank wouldn't even place in the top 10 in today's Olympia. He's too small.
Yeah.
He competed at what, 190 pounds? There's no way. No way. He might make the top 10, but that's it. He would never win today. Some of the greatest bodies of the past, it's just, the size has just gotten way past the point where, these guys, Frank Zane just can't be big. He doesn't have a big bone structure. He once told me when he went up to 205, he was smooth, only 205 pounds. I mean, that's nothing to compare to the guys today. So he had to compete at like 180, 185, maybe 190 tops. So that's just the way things have changed. But some people will point out that it's like anything else. Sport always evolves. People always try and take it a little further than it ever was. So it's very difficult to take these pro bodybuilders, being the way they are with all this mass, and say, listen, guys, why don't you dial it back, get the look that they had, let's say, in the 90s and the 80s, where it was more symmetrical, proportional physique. It's not going to happen.